Hello, this is Jill from Paper Daisy Crafting and welcome to my card making for beginners course. This is lesson number 8 and today's titled All About Ink. Okay, I'm going to be talking you through all the ink pads and inks that we have at Stampin' Up and explaining the differences and which ones you might need, which ones you won't need. So this is the complete collection of inks and ink pads that we do at Stampin' Up. So I'm going to clear them all out of the way and go through them one by one. So I'm going to clear all those out of the way. And I'm going to leave these two because these are the mainstay of our inks. These are our classic stamping pads. And they're two different designs. You can see these are old design. Now I still have quite a lot of pads because I bought mine before the design was changed. So these ones, you give that a little push and then you tip this over and it opens. Some people found that a bit tricky. So the new ones open slightly differently. Just pull it up and then slide, and some of them are a bit stiff because they are tight, because if the tighter they are, the more airtight the ink is going to be kept, and so it was less likely to dry out. So these are the new design, which, like you see, they are a bit easier to open. I know some people also open them by pressing here, but either I haven't got enough strength in my thumb, so you've got a little thumb hole there to get a grip, so you can just open them like that. And you could use them like that with a stamp case underneath, or you can just slide it so it supports itself. So two sorts of stamp pad. Now they're kind of a foam. They're not fabric. They're not linen or fabric. They're kind of a foam. And it's inked all over the stamp pad, and you may find when it arrives, when you get a new one, that it might be a bit too juicy. There might be a bit too much ink on there. What you can do is get a credit card and just squish some of the ink to the edge and use the bit that you've squished the ink out of, and then you'll get a drier patch, and you're not wasting that ink because gradually it will seep back into the pad. So it's a nice way to do it without wasting the ink. I also just wanted to say, can you see on the back here, you've got some labels. Now I've taken off one to label mine there, so when they're all stacked up, one of the advantages of this new design is they will stack really nicely. So they've got little bumps and little indents that make them stack together. So they will all stack together quite nicely, and then you can just see the colours here. And those labels all come with them. You also get a plain label that you can pop inside here, so that gives you a reminder. It doesn't say what the colour is, although if you wanted to, you could. There's some in different languages, so we've got it in French, I'm going to give a guess, German, I guess, and Japanese. So if you wanted to use one of those to give you a clue, you could, but I just used the plain colour ones to do that. And like I say, that we had two designs. I've still got quite a lot of those. It's not worth replacing. They do last for ages. So I've had these pads since 2016. I have hardly had to ink up any of them. So they do last forever. It's water-based dye ink, this ink, so it's quite quick drying. And the advantage of Stampin' Up ink pads over anything else, and I do have customers saying, oh, but I can get much cheaper. You can get cheaper, but it won't be such high quality. These are really high quality stamp pads. And of course the colours will coordinate with all the other Stampin' Up ranges. So these all come in the colour families. So they are on page 142 of the catalogue. Let's find my catalogue here. So page 142 of the catalogue. Here's the whole page that you can buy all the so you've got brights, neutrals, regals, subtles, a basics collection, and the in colour collections. So we've got 10 colours in each, so 50 colours of stamp pads, and of course they all coordinate with everything else. So you can buy cardstock, the classic stamp pad, you can buy the refills for the stamp pad, you can also buy stamping blends for most of the colours now. They've introduced most of the colours. Sometimes there's a dash, and I do just need to say there is one colour ink that isn't available. It's Purple Posy, one of the last year's in colours, and they just couldn't get the formulation right, and so instead of selling it as a lower quality, they decided to withdraw it altogether. So there isn't an ink for Purple Posy, but there is, there are markers, and there is Stampin' Blend, so you could buy those and use those as a substitute if you really wanted that colour. What I tend to do is use Highland Heather and just stamp it off, so you get a lighter image, and that's very close to Purple Posy. Yeah, so the stamp cases themselves are a very clever design, because if you notice, let's go back to my Coastal Cabana. If you notice, as I open it, watch which way the pad is. So can you see, when I store it that way up, the stamp pad is facing downwards, which means that the ink is always on the surface. If you store them the other way, the ink gradually soaks to the bottom and you won't get such a nice juicy image. That's a really good thing about the design. Now, to re-ink, all of the re-inkers come in every colour. They reformulated the pads and the inks fairly recently, a couple of years ago, so that it's less foaming. So sometimes when you used to re-ink, you used to get little bubbles, and they've reformulated to do away with that. So if I could get the lid off this. Oh, there we go. Right, I'm just going to show you how I re-ink. There are different ways of doing it. Again, you can do it with a credit card, but I just zigzag across the pad. This is not too unjuicy, so it's not going to show up very well, I'm afraid. But then I do that. Should have chosen a lighter colour. And then I use the back of a spoon, plastic spoon, because it's smooth. The worry that I have with the credit card is these foam pads may just rip a little bit if you're too heavy-handed. So just like that, and then I've got a re-inked stamp pad, and I just bring in a wipe and wipe that ink off there. And then I can use my spoon for whatever else I want. Now I just want to give you a little tip about stamping and using these pads, whichever ones you decide to use. I've got a little flower stamp on a pad here. When I was running classes, obviously I haven't done that for a long time with the lockdown, but when I was running classes, no matter how often I said to people, just tap, tap, tap. So the way to stamp effectively is just to very lightly tap on the stamp pad, and you will pick up plenty of colour. What people tended to do was much too hard. Can you see? You've got much less colour on the stamp, but you've got colour all around, and what then happens is if you stamp that image, what's likely to happen is you rock a bit and you get a mark, and you don't get such a clear image. If I just tap, tap, tap again, look how much darker that is. So just be very gentle. You only need to tap, tap, tap 2 or 3 times, and just check, have a look at it and make sure it's covered. But don't be too heavy-handed with it. The lighter the touch, the better, I would say. And you certainly don't want to press so hard that you get ink around your block, because that's really going to cause a problem with your stamping. So I'm just going to clean that off. So those are our standard stamp pads and refills. So like I say, you can buy them in all of 49 colours at the minute. It should be 50 without Purple Posy. And like I say, they coordinate with everything else in the Stampin' Up colour family. So that makes your crafting life really much better, much easier to make really lovely projects. They come in, you can buy them in family packs. You can buy them all individually, and they're £7 each. Now again, I know that sounds a lot of money, but like I said, they will last forever. Most of my pads, like I said, I've had since I joined in 2016. I haven't had to re-ink them. I use them a lot of colours. This is particularly one, which is why I got it out, because I know I use Per Pizzazz a lot, and I also use Coastal Cabana quite a lot, and they're nowhere near drying up. They're absolutely fine. If you buy them as a family, so if you buy 10 at once, you get 10% off. So instead of costing you £70, it'll be £63, which I know is a lot of money and it is a big investment, but I have not regretted buying. I've got the whole Stampin' Up collection, and every day I'm glad that I have, because you can bet your bottom dollar if I bought all of them but one, that one would be the one that I wanted to use that day. The other advantage of these is you can see on the Per Pizzazz, I think, that you can actually, it's easier to do on these old ones, but it is possible to do it on the new ones. If you just squeeze, you can get a little bit of ink on the lid, and you can then use that as a palette with a watercolour brush or one of our aqua painters, the water painters. Pick up the paint and you can use that for watercolouring, which is really nice. You've got a nice palette there. Like I say, I'll give it a go on the... See, this is a problem with the old styles. I can't do them. I'll give it a go on this one, but it is... They're not quite so flexible. I don't know whether that's going to work. Let's see. No, see, you've got to put a lot more pressure. I don't think I haven't got enough pressure in my thumbs to do that. So what I tend to do to use the ink... Oh, there we go. I did it. There we go. But what I tend to do is just put a clear block there and then use... So dump the clear block and use that as my palette, because that will just pick up a little bit of ink. Oh, I'm obviously stronger than I thought. I did get some on there. Okay, so that's our classic stamp pads. Now, if you're a beginner, yeah, like I say, that's quite a lot of money to invest. So what you could do, and what I've been suggesting to some of my customers, is that instead of that, you buy the Stampin' Spot collections. Now, the disadvantage is you can't choose colours then. It comes as this pack, and that's all you can have. So it comes as 8 classic Stampin' Spots, and it costs £22. So that's a big saving for 8 pads. And these are obviously much smaller, and because they're smaller, you will find they will dry out quicker. The tip is, I've kept mine in the packaging here because actually when I'm not using them, I turn this upside down and keep them upside down so that the ink, again, is always on the surface. So this is a different formulation. This is kind of like a linen, a fabric pad. And again, you can re-ink them in exactly the same way as we did the big pad, so when they dry out. So if you're going to buy the Stampin' Spots, it's a good idea to have the re-inkers. And especially if you're going to buy any of the in colours, because they won't be with us for very long. If you buy those pads, you might want to buy the re-inker at the same time, because then it won't matter when they retire. They've got a very short life in the catalogue. Is that everything I wanted to tell you about these? If you're using these, it's much easier to bring the pad to the stamp than the other way around. Doing it like that doesn't always work very well. So bring the stamp, the pad to the stamp. And one tip is, it is a lot easier to use these Stampin' Spots with the Stamparatus. We will be doing a lesson on the Stamparatus at some time in the future, and you will see it's much easier to use these little Stampin' Spots. And for that reason, I have started building up my collection of stamp pads that I've inked myself. So Stampin' Up sell packs of these Stampin' Spots that are empty, they're dry. They just come as plain Stampin' Spots, and you can then re-ink them with whatever colour you like. So I've got one here that I've inked up. This is a pool. I've given myself a little label on the bottom here, Pool Party. This is a Pool Party one, and this is the one I'll use rather than my big pad when I'm using the Stamparatus, because it's much easier to manoeuvre and to get the ink where you want it. So that's a tip as well. What I'm trying to do is gradually build up my collection of Stampin' Spots so that I have all the colours. But obviously these are something like £8.25 for 6, I want to say. And then you've got the cost of the re-inkers as well. But again, it's a cheaper way. If you bought the Stampin' Spots and there were just another couple of colours you wanted, it might be worth buying this and re-inkers, and then you can have the colours that you want. Right, so that's our classic stamp pads, our stamps, our coloured Stampin' Spots, and our blank Stampin' Spots. Anything else that I wanted to say? I just thought of something then, like it's gone out of my head. Might come back to it later. Right, the other pads we have are, firstly, we need a black, because we no longer have a black in a classic stamp pad. So the stamp pad that we have is Memento. So this is not exclusive to Stampin' Up. Obviously, all of these are exclusive to Stampin' Up and the Stampin' Spots and things. Memento ink isn't. Tuxedo black. And again, this is a linen type pad. And it's a very nice clear black ink. Let me take my... So I've got a sentiment stamp here. So ink it up. This stamp pad is going to need re-inking very soon, I think, because I've been using it a lot lately, and it's seemed to be getting a bit... so just and you get lovely clear black images. So very fine detail there. Can you see how detailed that is and how clear it is? So that's a lovely stamp pad. But again, what I would say to you is store it upside down, so that the ink is on the surface. I do that, I store it upside down. And this is particularly good for outline stamps where you're going to colour using our alcohol markers, our Stampin' Blends. This one, it won't bleed or run if you're using Stampin' markers, so that's a really good idea. It's not so good for watercolouring because it might bleed. I do use it sometimes. I let it dry really well first and then watercolour, and you can do it, but there's no guarantee that it won't run or bleed. So instead of using Memento, we have another black ink which is called Stays On, and this is a solvent based ink pad. So this one is water based, and the Memento. This is solvent based, so it's a lot. So you've got a little card there, and actually I saw a little tip the other day to just put some dimensionals on there, and then you can lay on there, because that's to keep the pad airtight. So this is a permanent ink, and it will stain your stamp, some of your stamps. So if you're very prissy about your stamps, you may not want to use this, but it is great for permanent images, and it's quite good for stamping on surfaces like acetate, or glass or china, fabric. So really good for mediums like that rather than paper. And if you are wanting to watercolour, then this one will not bleed if you're watercolouring. Excuse me, I need to cough. Oh, sorry, let's have a little drink. I don't know if it's the same all over when you're watching this, but we're in the middle of a real heat wave in the UK. We're having some of the highest temperatures ever recorded, and it's not my favourite kind of weather, I have to say. So I'm trying to stay out of it as much as possible, but it is making my hay fever a little worse at the moment. It's not too bad, but just can feel it. So that stays on. The other ink that we have is Versamark, and this is a clear ink. So you can see it's a clear stamp pad, and it's a kind of sticky ink, this one, so it's really good for heat embossing. So what you would do is ink your stamp, stamp it, and then sprinkle embossing powder on it and heat it, and it will produce an image. So I will be doing a whole video on heat embossing later in the course, so I'm not going to go into that now. But the other thing it's good for is watermarking. So can you see this piece of card? I have stamped this with this little flower with Versamark, so it gives you like a watermark effect, like a darker version of the card that you're stamping on. So if you don't believe me, let me show you. So you could do this by using the same ink, but can you see that now it works better on some colours than others. Here is a piece of Daffodil Delight, and I did stamp one earlier, but it doesn't show up nearly as well. I'll just do 3 of those. So you do need to choose your colours quite carefully, but on the darker colours it's a lovely way to get a tone on tone colour without having to buy all the stamp pads. So that's a really good tip as well. And again, it's got a refill with it. I meant to say the Memento Black also has a refill. So all of our inks we sell refills for, so you won't have to rebuy the pads. You can just buy the refills to keep them going. Anything else? So that's really good. These are really good for doing backgrounds and things, sort of making your own backgrounds. I really like that. The other thing is, because it's clear, if you're trying to do a pattern that needs to match up, it's quite tricky to see where you're stamping. So I actually have another Versamark pad to which I have added a little bit of grey ink. So this is a Versamark pad that I've added grey to, so it's still my sticky pad, so it will still be great for embossing. But if I show you, if I was stamping this this with our clear Versamark, I would stamp there and lift up, and then it would be very difficult to see to piece this together. And don't forget, I'm going to be embossing over this, so it won't matter that it's got a colour. So what I do is I've used some grey ink so that I can see where I've stamped. So I can stamp there, and I can see it, and it's still sticky because it's still got the Versamark ink there. And then I can line up exactly where I want this to go, like so. So that's a good tip. So, and in fact, that's got quite a lot of grey in it. I've just added some, but it can be a lot lighter than that. You don't need to add as much as that because you don't need it that dark. But that wouldn't show if I now sprinkled silver embossing powder over there. The grey wouldn't show. It would just be silver embossing, so it won't matter at all. But that's just a little tip. I have two. I want one clear for when I want to do the watermark effect, and one for when I'm doing embossing so that I can see my images. Again, store upside down, because the ink will always be on the surface. Right, and lastly, and this is a bit of a specialist pad, and it's not, this is the one that I'd recommend you buy last. It's not one that I use an awful lot. This is our white craft stamping pad. So, and it comes blank. So it's still in our old, this is still in our old style. I don't know whether they produce it now in our new style. I obviously bought mine a while ago. And you see I've only inked up part of it. So the rest of it, this is like a foam. It's not the same foam as the normal stamp pads though. This is more like a normal foam. And I've inked up a bit. This is very, very thick, sticky ink. If I do a little bit for you. Can you see that when I did the Coastal Cabana, it just soaked in. This one doesn't soak in so much, or not so quickly. It's quite a thick, sticky ink. But again, you can smooth. And I've only done a little bit here because so far I've only ever used this with quite small stamps. But you can see how the spoon just smooths it out and gives you a coating. So it's good for some things. Let me just show you the effect you get. So I'll do it with our... just clean the Versamark off this one. There. So there we go. So you can stamp in white on coloured cardstock. So it's not absolutely true white, so you can still see the colour coming through, but it does give that hazy effect. So it's quite a nice effect sometimes, but like I said, I don't use it a huge amount. Wouldn't be in a hurry to buy that if it's not something that you desperately need. So there we are. That's our little run through all our inks. I hope you found that useful. We will be coming back and doing some cards using the Versamark as a background and various things, and doing some, we'll have a whole video on colouring, so we'll be using Memento and StazOn to do colouring. So I hope you will join me then, but meanwhile, thank you for joining me today. I hope you're enjoying this little series of card making for beginners. Hope you're finding some good tips. Even if you're not a beginner, maybe you're finding some good tips. And I will be back soon. So, oh, the other thing I forgot to say was with the white ink, it is a sticky, because it's sticky, you can use that for embossing as well. So if you've got Versamark and you have got this, you could use this for heat embossing as well. Oh, and the other thing, sorry, going back on myself, I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure that I say things. The StazOn, like I said, it will stain your stamps, but we do have a cleaner now. Let me see if I can quickly find the stamp cleaner. Let's see, is it 146 maybe? There we go. StazOn. No, it's not there. So where is it? Let me just find that for you. It will be in here. Ah, here we go. StazOn cleaner. It's with all the other cleaners. So StazOn cleaner cleans and conditions stamps and minimises staining with the StazOn ink. So and it does recommend that when you use it on cling stamps that you wash with water immediately to rinse the StazOn cleaner off, otherwise your stamps could deteriorate. So yeah, so you can buy cleaner for the StazOn. So if you want to do a lot of watercolouring, that would be a good investment, the stamp pad and the cleaner. Right, so that is all of our stamp pads talked about. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I'm just going to put them all back on here again. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I will be back soon with another edition of my card making for beginners, and I do hope you can join me then. Thanks very much and have a great day. Bye.